When I was 10 years old, I was running. I was playing some friends were playing tag on the street. Lived in a pretty vibrant neighborhood with a lot of working families, and there was a lot of kids in my neighborhood. And we were running. We were chasing. I was running this kid as fast as someone as short as me can run. And this old dude standing outside, he goes, "Hey, run, nigger, run." And that was the first time, and I think no, maybe it's the first. I think I've been called that word 3 times, but that was the first time I've ever been called that particular slur. Hey guys, it's James with This Beautiful Crazy Life. I just wanted to talk about something really interesting here. So I'm almost at 200 subscribers, so this channel is slowly growing. I started this channel in October, and it's been a pretty slow burn with a couple videos cracking over 1,000, but for the most part, pretty slow. But I'm really excited to see where this channel is growing. And last time I almost hit 200, I lost a bunch of subscribers because I did a video on mental health. And so now I'm going to do a video on racism as I get closer to 200 subscribers to alienate possibly more people. But I think with the people I have now, I think they understand what the purpose of this channel is to talk about anything. Like I say in almost every video, the purpose of this channel is to talk about politics, theology, Bible, culture, media, race, international stuff, everything in between, food, whatever you want to talk about, I talk about it. And a lot of times I try to offer a Christian perspective or my view on something. And so, yeah, I think it's appropriate that we talk about this. The only reason I'm talking about this is that, and I didn't plan this video, it was just earlier today, I saw a video that was recommended to me called Why I Left a White Church. And I thought that was really interesting. It was, I'll put the link in the video and you guys can watch it, but it was about a black woman who came up in a mostly predominantly black church. She ended up leaving to a more white church, predominantly, somewhere down south. I think she lives down south anyway. And she just talked about some of the struggles she had, whether it was dealing with politics or people actually just making really sly comments or people actually saying racial slurs. That's sort of the most blatant racism you can get. And it was just really interesting, right? But just sort of the difficulties that come with that from just cultural differences, but also the big thing of just being she wasn't being loved or supported in certain areas when it became to big issues like with George Floyd, police brutality, the whole idea of systematic racism or racism in general. And then after watching that video, another video was recommended from me called With the Perrys. Is that what their channel's called? But it's with Preston and Jackie Hill Perry. You guys know them. Preston is an apologist. Jackie's a rapper and poet. Both are poets and are both great Bible teachers. I think they're more on the Reformed Calvinist camp. Love listening to them. And they were asked a question: why do you think so many black Christians are leaving white churches?
Evangelical churches in droves. Myself and pretty much all of my black friends have left their church where it was predominantly white. I have white friends and I keep trying to explain it to them, but all I can say is that the lack of diversity and lack of attention to social injustice has made me not want to step.
And their whole thing was kind of along hers, which was just this idea that a lot of black people aren't feeling loved when it comes to these issues of racism, dealing with just different things when it comes to police brutality and things that a lot of black people in the black community feel impacted by. And I just thought that was really interesting because back in 2016, there was a lot of articles after Donald Trump got elected that a lot of black Christians were feeling very alienated from their white Christian counterparts, and that many Christians who are in these like multiracial churches, which usually are just predominantly white, were kind of leaving in droves. They were calling it this black mass exodus, where they were either leaving church altogether or going back to more predominantly black churches. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the Bible calls us to love one another. There's tons of verses, right? And it's called for unity. And I was recently listening to this interview with Francis Chan, who I guess is coming out of a book right now, about unity, because, you know, he's been kind of going around speaking to a lot of charismatics and Catholics and people outside his former Calvinist reform group and talking to all these people. And also, like, with the thing, like, with Lecrae, when he starts, because he came up mostly in, like, predominantly white reform circles, and, you know, when he started speaking out and things that were important to him about things like Trayvon Martin and racial injustice and all that stuff, he got a lot of pushback and was either called a Marxist or a leftist or a Democrat. Those are all buzzwords people use to just exclude people out. And so I just noticed, you can see that giant trash bag full of clothes taken to Goodwill. I don't know if I'll edit that out or not, but I just thought it was really interesting. It was really interesting because there's a lot of black Christians who are feeling like white Christians aren't caring about them. Now, this is a really complex issue because, one, it excludes people who are Polynesian, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, Indigenous, Native American, you know, a bunch of other people have this because we always focus sort of on the black and white issue and not all the other things that come into racial politics and cultural things. But I still think, why do I have this ring light? You can't see my face, right? But I still think it's worth discussing here. And I just want to talk about, I want to give you guys 3 stories, and I'm going to end this, and then kind of give a broader point about this idea of unity and loving one another. So during the George Floyd thing, we saw the deep divide that still exists within America. Anyone who knows about American church background or history, in the 90s, there was a huge push for multicultural churches, this whole idea of racial reconciliation, like, should churches be divided by race? And that's a really good question, right? I mean, in some ways, these are personal preferences, you know? If you're someone who came in this country and you speak mostly Spanish, it's very nice to have a Spanish service or go to church that everyone speaks your language predominantly. Even if you speak English, it's probably just easier, right? And also, there's very familiar things. You get to be the culture, the food, and all these long traditions, you know? On the other hand, like, how do we be unified when we have all these denominations and divided by racial groups and politics and economics and neighborhood stuff and city and international and national politics? How does one actually be unified there? And so I really don't know. I just know the Bible calls us to love one another. And, you know, we have a bunch of people, a bunch of black Americans who kind of join these white churches. Either we're saved through them or join them for a bunch of different reasons. Maybe they like the theology, maybe just vibe with them. Maybe they didn't like the culture of a predominant black church. Whatever it is, that's a lot to impact there. I'm not going to do it today, but they join a predominantly white church. And now they realize that people who are, you know, who are conservative and white are more likely to vote for Republican and have different issues that matter to them. While traditionally, black Americans, even black Christians, vote Democrat. And there's a long history why. I'm going to put in a link by Phil Vischer, who is the creator of VeggieTales, who has a podcast called The Holy Post and a YouTube channel called The Holy Post. Or maybe it's called his name. Doesn't matter. I'm going to put a link in there if you guys can read that, because there's a fascinating history on why those two racial groups vote the way they vote. And then once again, that excludes Asians and Hispanics and the complex stuff there. And even those are broad terms, but you guys get what I'm saying. And I just want to give you 3 stories on sort of my experience going to a predominantly white church. Now, I went to a church a couple years ago. The church no longer exists. And it was a mixed racial group, but it was mostly white. I mean, I live in Alaska, which is one of the most diverse states in the union, believe it or not. But our churches are still racially segregated for the most part. And the church I went to was pretty diverse, but it was still probably about 70% white. And I just want to tell you 3 stories on sort of how I, sort of just things that show sort of the good and bad and the hardships of doing that, right? Of being in a culture that's very different than your own, because there are differences between black and white cultures. That's just a fact. There's nothing wrong with that. And how to navigate between those things there is very difficult. So the first one is, one time, you know, I was a youth pastor and I was hanging out with some other people who I serve with in this ministry. And 2 of the people were talking about something, and I don't even know how the conversation got started, but they were like, and they were like, what did they say? Oh, sorry. And they were bringing up this whole idea that we were talking about student loans. I was like, yeah, I have a pretty large amount of student loans, unfortunately, not as much as some people, and I'm paying them down, all that stuff there, but I probably took out more than was needed. And they're like, don't black people get like free money for being black? And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, doesn't the government give out free money for just being black? Aren't there all these scholarships from all these organizations? You have to be black. Why do you owe so many student loans? I was like, that's not a thing. I've actually had someone bring that up once when I was working in the legislature, but that's really not a thing. And since it's been brought up like 4 times to me, I think, like, is this a thing that white people think? Someone tell me in the comments. I'm really confused by that. But they thought that because I was black, I could just get scholarships. Now, are there scholarships funded by private organizations that tailor to black people, like the United Negro College Fund? Sure. But do you just get free money for being black? Not that I'm aware of, or none of my friends are aware of. And if they are, someone send me the link right now. I need this stuff paid. But as far as I know, you have to qualify for these things. You have to do something for them. The government just doesn't give you free money just for being black. At least not the federal government. I don't know any state governments start doing that either. And, these scholarships that you do apply for, one, usually you have to have the good grades. In high school, I kind of slacked off as a student. I didn't really actually work hard in school until I was in college because I was paying for it, and also my family saved up some money for me, and I really wanted to honor that, and so I worked really hard in college. But in high school, man, if I could get by, I could get by. There's no way I was going to get any amount of scholarships. And I was always a pretty smart kid, I think. There's a lot of reasons why. I won't get into it. Maybe I'll get into it later. But for whatever reason, college really didn't feel like a thing at the time, and I really had so much going on. Focusing on school was very, very difficult just because of my home family life, and even when things got easier, I was just kind of checked out to begin with. But I know you just don't get money for being black. Sorry, I just messed with the microphone there. But then let me tell you another story. During the George Floyd killing, there was there was a lot of protests going on, and there was a lot of talk about what it is to be black in America. And what was really cool was there were people from my church who probably are Trump voters or whatever, more conservative. People who, like a lot of Americans on the left, will classify as, if you vote for Trump, you're racist, which is such a stupid thing to say. But they checked on me. They would send me messages and text messages. Hey, how you doing? Just want to let you know I support you. What can I do? And all these things there. These are people that a good chunk of Americans have discounted completely because they voted a certain way or have certain beliefs. Same church, those two different things there. It is true that if you're more conservative, you probably don't believe in something like systemic racism. That is a true thing. And if you're more on a liberal or just happen to be black culturally, you're more likely to believe in systemic racism for a bunch of historic reasons and personal experiences. And then let me tell you a third story. One of my friends who I went to church with, 2 friends of mine, one was one of the pastors there. Him and his wife invited us to their home with several people, and they were like, hey, I don't really understand a lot of this. I don't know if I even agree with what's being said or not said. I just want you to share your ideas with me and let's talk about it. That was really cool, right? Because they're very conservative. They have a very certain idea on certain things. And I know we have different views and experiences and just to be able to do that was really cool. So I've kind of experienced it all going to a predominantly white church. I would say my experience was pretty good, but there were definitely frustrating moments when things like this happen, whenever there was a protest or politics, because there was a good chunk of people, even though the church was culturally, politically, and racially mixed, still the majority as people who were white and tended to be more conservative. And that had a lot of issues, especially with leadership. When certain sermons were preached or something like that, if it was just a little quote unquote liberal, a lot of people in the congregation would be very upset about it. But anyone go on stage and say any conservative thing they want, talking point, and people didn't seem to have a problem with that there, And of course, I'm leaving out so much nuance. The church I went to was extremely beautiful. I love everyone there. I actually had a really good experience, but there were experiences where I was like, I don't know if I can do this as well. So I had both. It was mixed. When it came to this particular issue, there's times where I just felt very frustrated with the conversation. But I can personally say, I don't know about other people went there, never felt unloved, you know? And so I think there is a way to do this where, look, we're not always going to agree on all this stuff. And I know for Christians who are not, for black people who are not Christians or non-Christians in general, this whole idea that you need to love someone regardless of if they agree with your politics or not sounds crazy. You know, that's one reason a lot of people don't like Christianity, is because this whole idea of loving people in all their sin and ridiculousness and badness, all those things, and still be loving to them. It's one of the cornerstones of the church, is to love people and try to strive for unity. And while I don't know what that looks like, because love is an action for some people, excuse me. And so because love is an action, we have to make sure, even if we don't understand someone's story, we still need to show them love. Black Christians who are frustrated with feeling like white Christians don't understand or care, there are a lot of people who care and care about you, even if they don't know you, and are trying to do what they can and try to understand it. And to white Christians who just feel like we're a bunch of Marxist Democrats or something, you shouldn't be dismissing people, right? There are a lot of good Christians who don't just agree with you guys on either side. And these are important issues. I don't say that flippantly. Like, these are really important issues that do not need to be ignored for the sake of unity, but instead, for unity, we need to keep on going with these issues. But when it just comes to things like name calling and all that stuff there, and dismissing someone and saying they're not a Christian all because they voted for this person, whatever, that's trash. And if you don't agree with me, whatever. I'm sure there's gonna be someone in the comments who say you just can't be Christian because of abort, whatever. Look, that's you. I don't agree with that. But I just think the world's a very complex place, and I want to try and be as loving as I can to everyone I see, and it's really hard, and I pray that the Lord changes my heart. In the beginning of this video, I shared a story, and it's not just clickbait, because you're probably like, wait, loving with the old dude, that whole like calling you the N-word thing. And I want to say, like, that type of racism is extremely rare. The type of racism, the thing that so many people are talking about, like, is the whole idea of maybe microaggressions or things like that, is that, you know, a lot of times, like, the small things can wear you down. Like, how many times do I have to have a conversation like this? Like, what's your favorite superhero? Oh, you know, my favorite superhero in Marvel is Thor. I love Thor. I love, like, Thor Ragnarok and what they do with him. Someone always goes and says, oh, Black Panther, ha. Like, if that's done, like, every time, you know, over a couple of years, it gets old. You know, it's just like being culturally insensitive does wear people down, and we shouldn't just ignore them. Like, it's really easy to get upset and understand why someone doesn't like being called the N-word, but let's have a little bit of empathy for people about the little things we say over time, and just have a little cultural sensitivity. You know, every summer someone comes up to me and they're like, huh, I just came back from Hawaii, I got a tan, I'm as dark as you. You know, like, come on. And I know people don't do that as like being mean, but like after years and years, like, bro, like, yeah, I'm black, but it's a part of me, but like stuff like that can really wear people down. And I think there's been times where I've made racial jokes maybe that were really insensitive, and I'm learning. Like, I actually had someone tell me like they didn't like that I made jokes about white people one time years ago, and I was like, bro, like, I need to work on that. Maybe that's not super nice, you know? So let's just be very loving together. Like, I think racism is real, and if we want to confront and love each other, we need to make sure that we're loving people. So I know this video was a lot longer than what PRE people were expecting, and this is a terrible way to increase my subscribers, which is part of my goal, is to grow this channel, so we can talk about who God is and Jesus and how to love people. But whenever this issue comes up, I know it can be touchy. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. We're probably going to hit 200 subscribers soon. If you like this video, please like and share. I'll see you guys later.